Welcome back. This is session 7, improving network optimization through automation. I mean, automation has been a mantra in telecom for about a decade already, and the drive for further efficiencies in the network along with data traffic growth is accelerating automation strategies. Advances in AI are enhancing the opportunities, but further developments are still needed, such as a unified approach to data collection and management, along with improvements in energy efficiency. At the same time, of course, adoption of disaggregation and open networking risks adding complexity here. So we're going to get on to all of that in just a few moments with our expert panelists. But first, it's time for a quick one-to-one chat with one of our guests. And I'm delighted to be joined on stage by Vish Mathur, who's Global Head of Engagement at the Telecom Infra project. Vish, great. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the Telecom Infra project, known mostly as TIP, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what people talk about, yeah. And Vish, you know, TIP has been incredibly, it's 8 years. 8 years TIP's been around. And like the industry, the organization has evolved as well. Can you just give us a quick overview of its main areas of focus right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Ray, for the question. For those who don't know who TIP is, very quickly, I know it's been around for 8 years. We're also a trade association like the GSMA. We have around 150 to 200 plus members, organizations from telcos, startups, OEMs, system integrators, etc. The core focus and mission for TIP now is really trying to make sure that we can industrialize and scale the adoption of open disaggregated network solutions and build on top of that. So, you know, AI-based solutions or showcase the way these reference implementations can be scaled out. What's happened now, right now, we're in 2024, TIP is now in a place where it's just trying to create the structure to make sure we do that industrialization and do further innovation. So a few changes that have happened just very recently. Our board, which is consisted of mostly EMEA Tier 1 telcos and Intel, Dell, and Meta, we just recently added Rob Sony from AT&T to the board, which helps to generate a little bit more of a global cross-section of understanding and strategy. And that governance flow down is coming through into our technical committee, i.e. looking at future direction of these types of technologies, and then into our programs as well. So to answer your question there, the focus for TIP going forward is on 5 main areas. One, which has continued to be one of the key areas, is around Open RAN, and we'll talk a little bit about how that's going at the moment as a community. So 50% of our membership is very much around Open RAN focus, and that's a spillover into another program called Telco AI. Everyone has got AI in their language, but when you look at what we're hearing today from the first panel, where a use case or demand-generated sort of ideology of services creating requirement for networks to perform, TIP is basically a community looking at what those reference architectures can look like in the telco AI space. 3 other areas is around disaggregation in Wi-Fi, and that's become quite a strong development path for a community of ISPs, cloud control providers, as well as access point developers, you know, hardware manufacturers, on an open source code base. So we'll talk about that. And the other 2 areas is around transport, so fixed and mobile or wireless, optical IP transmission. There's quite a bit of an abundance of change in that space where disaggregation between hardware and software is actually generating a lot of GA solutions in that space. And then finally, not mentioned quite that much today, is around neutral host and shared infrastructure. So there's a strong cohort of towercos and infrastructure providers, SIs, and maybe the Ghana example is one of those, but there is a really strong community and interest to try and leverage passive infrastructure and start to develop value chains and business models for densifying urban areas, not just rural, but urban areas, as well as private networks or, in-building requirements. So those are the 5 main focal programs and a governance change, et cetera, around that.
Okay. So obviously in recent years, we've seen disaggregation shift from, in many instances, from the planning and test and trial stage into actually deployments, whether that's in the RAN or in the transport side of things as well. Yeah. How has TIP's role evolved as things have shifted from PowerPoint plans, tests, and into actual commercial networks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are three main things. One is there's an abundance of examples out there, whether it's on the RAN, whether it's in transport, et cetera, where telcos or ISPs are really driving forward their own deployment plans. So they're coming to TIP to surface those, and we're using those as reference points for the rest of the industry to see what is possible. So a lot of this is about trying to promote and to educate. So use TIP as a channel to do that. So our member community does that. They showcase blueprints. They showcase how vendors have come together and actually shown that there's deployment and integration and lifecycle management happening in those deployments. The second is actually trying to work out what is needed and what is the gap in the industry to build a bit more confidence. And so TIP's focus, and has been for a couple of years, we talked about something called scope in a MWC a couple of years back, but actually our focus is on system level testing. So for that to happen, that requires a good understanding of what performance criteria or test criteria are required to ensure that a multi-vendor system can be deployed, can be operated, and can be managed. And actually, it's not just about feature parity, it's about performance as well. So what we tend to do is looking at the whole system in that regard. So secondly, beyond just test plans and test criteria, there needs to be capacity in the market for where testing can occur. So a lot of that can be in operator labs or vendor labs, but what we're trying to do is offer a service to those demand-side players in the sense that rather than putting all the investment into their labs to have capable infrastructure and test capability, let's look at some neutral test environments to do that. So TIP is actually now focusing on developing a sort of a global federation of capable high-capacity test labs. And these are members of TIP who offer that as a service.
Okay.
And then finally, actually, is catalyzing more deployment, et cetera. So some of the governments out there are interested in not just doing investment into labs, but also seeing actual deployment. So we're working with some of the influential governments to release some catalytic funding in certain key strategic markets to drive forward more work and deployment.
Okay. And then can you just talk briefly about the importance of a harmonized approach to data structures in digital service provider networks and how TIP is working with its members here? And that's kind of pertinent to what we're about to talk about. But this is something that you've been looking at, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 2 areas or 2 domains that we've been trying to look at data and what sort of data structures are required. One, which is a little bit more mature, is around RIC and XApps and RApps and automation and optimization of RAN workloads. Of course, there are great. The big exam question is how do you get access to operator data? So through trial, working with operators, we are focusing on particular use cases and applications and showing not only the ideology of integratable RIC platforms and applications, but also then looking at testing those in real-world scenarios and ensuring that when applications are put into the network, that they can be leveraged and the data makes sense in that respect. The new aspect where we're going in this telco AI project group, which has just been started by Deutsche Telekom, NVIDIA, and Intel, and a few other operators, is then now looking at, the other one, we were looking at digital twins as well. So we're wondering whether there's a need set for digital twins capable with test labs. The Telco AI project group just started up. That's where we're going to, time will tell, what will that look like? What are the use cases that will be generating a need to look at sort of reference AI architectures or distributed compute architectures, and what are the data requirements around that? Long and short is we're an industry body, so we're looking for harmonization of approaches, so guidelines on how data should be leveraged, especially within the regulatory landscape, but also how do you actually bring enough data to start to develop out a marketplace of applications, et cetera. So we're still at the early stages on that.
Okay. But, we hear so much, we've heard it the last 2 days, but hearing a lot more about, the need for real industry collaboration, because that's the only way that a lot of these problems are going to get solved. And, TIP is one of those bodies that's helping that to happen. So
yeah, we're part of the equation. I mean, we're certainly where maybe the GSMA sits very much in the telecom operator space and looking at demand side requirements. TIP can focus in on not looking at standards, but actually looking at referenceable architectures that can be leveraged in the network to expose capabilities. So the world is moving towards this service-oriented place, environment, and we all want a piece of the action and piece of the pie. So, but we need the ecosystem to come together and on a harmonized set of requirements.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks very much, Vish. Let's give Vish a round of applause, please, for bringing us up to speed with TIP. Now, don't go anywhere, Vish, because you're sticking around with us for our panel session. Now, as ever, we need to bring more chairs onto the stage. So we're going to have our final video montage while we rearrange the furniture and invite our next panelists onto the stage. And this video is hot off the press. It's from last month's Open RAN Summit. So roll VT, as they say.
We have started deploying Open RAN in dense urban areas, pretty much a urban environment where we have highly loaded site, which gives us real picture of how Open RAN is performing in terms of KPIs and customer experience and whatnot. And we've been pleasantly surprised to see how Open RAN is at par and in some aspects even better than traditional RAN technologies.
When we start using the power of AI and machine learning, the RIC is in a perfect position to exploit that power. And so as time goes on and we start launching better services and optimizing the network, that's where the RIC becomes essential. So right now, no, we don't need it, but in the future, yes, we do.
Deployment of Open RAN and its introduction in our networks will be gradual. As the brownfield operator, we have very demanding requirements, and also introduction of Open RAN comes with some impacts in terms of operation and which requires also lots of upskilling on our side.
We need to disaggregate. We need to decompose the RAN software, because if you want to run AI automation, right, you want to run the workloads in terms of CI/CD, DevOps, you cannot do a monolithic kind of architecture.
We will see the deployments scaling in the brownfield environment as the renewal cycles are coming. And of course, by then, it is important that we are able to move to the horizontal model of architecture and break the silos.
Okay, excellent. So time to get into our panel. But as ever, before we talk about improving network optimization through automation, we need to remind everybody that this session has a poll. 1 question, 3 answers. You can only pick one as ever. Here is the poll question. What will have the greatest impact on improving network operational efficiency during the next 5 years? As you can see, 3 options. You can only choose one. Please go ahead and vote. You'll find all of the polls in the DSP Leaders World Forum section on the agenda page, and we will take, as ever, a look at the results at the end of this session. So, with that out of the way, let's welcome our co-host for this session, Diego Lopez, Senior Technology Expert at Telefónica and an ETSI Fellow. Diego, you are a veteran not only of the industry, but of our events here as well. You've been to a few, haven't you?
Yeah.
I mean that in the best possible way, of course. So you're experienced, but I think this is your first co-hosting session, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So well, let's see. I hope that'll be up to the expectations.
Of course, absolutely, 100%. And we have a great panel, as ever, to go with our co-hosts. So, as ever, we're going to get them to introduce themselves, starting at the far end with Anita.
Anita Döhler, CEO of the NGMN Alliance.
Faiq, I'm part of Rakuten Symphony, leading OSS Global Sales.
Vishal Mathur, Global Head of Engagement at TIP.
Darrell Jordan-Smith, CRO at Wind River.
Sadek Yabeta, Head of Open RAN in NTT Docomo.
Okay, excellent. Welcome, everybody. So, Diego, if you'd like to make your way to the lectern for the DSP leaders address, please.
Okay. So, well, when talking about this, my role of co-host, thank you to those who decided to bring me here. Well, I was thinking about the idea of automation and what we are still talking about automation, when if you think about it, the ideas around automation, automatics, closed loops, etc., have been around, well, basically for centuries. They were considered before. At the end of the 19th century, and from that moment on, we have the transfer functions, the closed loops, etc. And what I'm thinking about it, the real difference and what is keeping us busy, and when I mean us, I hope the whole industry, but at least my team in Telefónica, is about our data, about how we guarantee sustained and trustworthy data flows that can be properly interpreted by the control elements, and that can properly reach the controlled elements as well. So the idea is that anything, if you think about it, what is the important thing that we require to have proper automation, to take advantage of automation while we deploy and operate our networks, should be about guaranteeing that those data flows are as they should be. They should be because everything else should be, from the point of view of the operator, should be exchangeable. Whether we are using an algorithmic control, we are using AI, we are using whatever other technique that comes in the future, what we own, what we have, and we can generate, and what we can control is the data, that we are feeding it. And the data, let me insist on this, because control actions are no more than data. The data that we extract for the processing of the input data that they do. This is very important when you think about these data flows, is that to consider this bidirectional nature. A control action is data coming out that has to reach the plant where it's being controlled, the same way that the data that the plant produces, a product of the measurements, is aggregated, combined, etc., for being consumed by the element that is controlling in the closed loops. The same way we had to translate this outcome in something that makes sense. You think about it, the flows are the same in different directions, and the processes are totally the opposite. In one case, we are aggregating. In the other case, we are somehow disaggregating. But it's important that everything is the same, and we are working on making sense of that data, those data in both directions. If you think about it, these data flows define whatever has to do with the control loop, apart from sure of the loop itself. That the loop itself has this definition that, as I said, has more than 2 centuries of age. And it does define the loops themselves, what they are connecting, and their life cycle. When you activate a loop, when you put this into action, is when you connect the loop with the appropriate data flows, is what allows whatever mechanism for composition that is essential in any system that is of a reasonable complexity, and networks are whatever you want, but it's extremely complex and heterogeneous. whatever pattern for composition of the control loops, whether you want to build a hierarchy, whether you want to build a federation, whether you want to build any kind of cooperation mechanisms, requires, again, flows of data of different natures. It's not raw telemetry data. We can talk about exchange of knowledge. We can talk about the exchange of models themselves, or of parameters, whatever, but we are talking, again, about the flows of data. And finally, they preserve something that I believe that, in particular, with the current trend towards the use of smart controllers, AI controllers, Gen AI, whatever, is more and more important. That is about how you control essential properties that are related to things like, for example, being able to authenticate the data themselves and the sources of data, authorize who can use the data and for what, and providing something that is equally essential, that is accounting. So you can know who used the data, what the data was used for, and so sustain goals related with explainability, of being able of analyzing why something happened, some decision was taken, tracing it back to the reasons and tracing it back to how data was provided. During the execution or during the training is the same. We are reusing, and the idea is to trace what the data, the paths the data are traversing, and the sources of those data, and being able to trace them back. Equally important is for whatever we need for doing some debugging, validation, evaluation of any model of whatever what we need. Again, is data that we can rely on, is data that we can manipulate, and that is available at the right time and at the right place. With this in mind, we some time ago started a few projects on this. We have been working on this since we started to deal with automation and with the goals of the different generations. We started this with our 5G original project. Right now we are running 2 projects that are very much focused on aspects regarding with these warranties, on provenance, on access control, etc. It's a project that is called Robust. And we have in another project, so we call it Horse, in which what we are running is and defining is how we can define what-if scenarios based on evidence, based on data, so we can evaluate in advance as well, which is what could be the impact of a particular automated decision on the network performance and characteristics. And with this, I will close here. I think that we have, I hope I have laid some ground for further discussion. And just let me remember when making the notes for this, that reminds me a comment I read some time ago about a counselor of a politician about the economy. And well, just translating it is just remind that it is the data, stupid. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. Interesting project there to, looking at the implications of what happens if you try to automate something. That, I think, people must have been delving into for quite some time and still trying to figure it out. But I want to come to our panelists now and find out if anybody has a question for Diego following that those opening remarks. Faiq. Yeah.
So thank you, Diego. This was very insightful. I'm not going to try to be controversial, or maybe. If we take a step back and talk about nobody is going to go away from the importance of the data you mentioned about getting it in the right way, but why automation? Why go with this whole journey? Mm-hmm. I still believe that maybe we are in other sessions also covering this point, but not really coming out, and I wanted to ask you, what's your view on this? That what are the KPIs? What are we doing this for? I mean, if it's for the sake of automation, or if it's really for the sake of measuring true KPIs around how this closed loop functions or automation is really changing something? Is it really about resource optimization in a meaningful KPI? is it really the real end subscriber achieving the true result of this automation? I believe we all want to achieve that, and there's no doubt about it, but are there really measurable KPIs, and our organizations and operator environment is really measured on that, or it goes back to the traditional KPIs we always measured on?
Well, frankly, you think about it, at the end, what we're talking is about another kind of data. We were talking about the telemetry data that you input, the control data that you output, and then there would be some kind of effectiveness data that we had to make by comparing. Is another data flow, and this is something I will use and not talk about only 2 data flows. I will, if you allow me, I will use talking about the 3 data flows. For sure, that's very important. I mean, measuring what is the impact that we are achieving with automation, taking into account that deploying automation has cost. Has cost in several, and taking this into account is something very quite interesting. During the lunch break, I was talking with David. I don't know where he is, but we were talking about what the TM Forum is starting to do on something that they call key AI, which is key. Which is the E for? I have forgotten it, but is about how you can value not only the performance indicator, but the effectiveness. It's about the effectiveness that you have on the, and that's really important. And again, it's not exactly metadata, because metadata is about something else, but it's about meta information, knowing what. That's a very good point, worth considering. Yes.
Okay. I'm sure we'll hear about that in a couple of weeks in Copenhagen as well at the TM Forum event. That sounds pretty interesting. Any other questions for Diego at this point?
I would be interested to get your perspective on, you have all this data. How do you decide what data to focus on and what not, from a perspective of looking at, we talked a lot about AI. Are there some natural AI tools, or we're not there yet with the modeling? We have to have people look at that data.
No, what we are doing right now, and something that we are starting with this application, something I'm not going to pretend that we have AIs and closed loops, fully autonomous everywhere. But one of the things that we're doing is analyzing which are the features more than the data. I mean, at the end is the data flow, but what is important is that you can derive features that make sense. Right. We have run several experiments about which are the features that, for example, make sense on guaranteeing that there is no congestion, or identifying congestion before it happens. Mm-hmm. Right now, we are running a quite interesting experiment on whether we can get some early indications of a peak in energy consumption, mm-hmm, derived from the traffic, whether that's influenced by the share bandwidth that you're using, or the size of packets, the number of packets, etc. With some results that for the moment are still, how to say it, not very definite. Mm-hmm. But identifying this is very interesting. Anyway, what I think is important is when you think about a data infrastructure, is the capacity of making it flexible enough that if you, for whatever the reason, you need to change the feature you're focusing in is something that should be doable with a reasonable amount of effort. The data is there, and it's true. During this morning, somebody was mentioning that the amount of data that we can collect is something that, blows your mind. And the idea making this selection is essential. And having the flexibility of making this selection dynamically is essential.
Okay, thank you. Anita.
Yeah, Diego, so Telefónica being an international company, what is your experience when you run those projects with regards to scalability and applicability to all the different markets and operations?
Good question regarding no, I mean, in general, I would say that when it comes to the let's say, basic network behavior, and this is something that you can apply almost. If you're talking about preventing congestion or protecting the network against attacks and things like that, are something that is quite regular. Mm. Then you enter delicate situations when we're talking about data policies, when we're talking about rules about what is considered a personal information or not, what can be computed or not computed, and that can become tricky. Again, and that's what calls is for. What we are trying to achieve is we refer to it as a data fabric, and we are trying to apply techniques for semantic attribution of data so we can process it accordingly. It's tricky. I mean, can be really hard when you, even inside the European Union, there are different rules, and if you go to America, that's something that is can be really complicated. It's tricky, and we are trying to build something that is flexible enough. I'm not saying that automatically will be working everywhere, but that would allow people to adapt it to the.
I just imagine that maybe also the database is different, so I don't want to ask anything what might be confidential company information.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there are things that we are not going to. For example, something that is for us is very important is when you are told by some vendor about I have a marvelous model. You can train it. Give me your data, I will train it. That even with all NDA signed, etc., that's something that sounds a little bit. And that's why, for example, we are heavily working in synthetic environments. People tend to talk about digital twins. I prefer to talk about the synthetic environments because it's more than a twin. We try to make it that it's more than a twin, or it's a twin on steroids. And we are trying to generate data sets that make sense, that can be useful for many purposes, and normally are not necessarily realistic because they go beyond real situations. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Sarayuki.
Yeah, it might be not directly the optimization, but one of the motivation to introduce the automatic features, how to recover the network in short time for the operators. So the error detection and automatic recovery is, I think, one of the most important topic. But so that the error do not happen so often, hopefully. So that gathering the information is also difficult in the case. So for that case, so what the Telefónica doing to improve that?
No, what we are trying to do is we are trying to identify mechanisms for early detection, for identifying patterns that not necessarily mean for us and something, and whatever the incident, something that when the incident is already happening and when you have already noticed and the impact has already occurred, well, everybody knows this and is trying to recover takes time, always. If you are able, and this is something that we have the impression that this makes sense, is that if you're able to detect this ahead of the real impact, ahead even of the human capacity of detecting it, and we are trying to reproduce this situation. Somehow it's like having trained dogs that can smell something that is not detectable by humans, but is detectable by them. We're trying to do so because we believe that it's equally important that you are fast in your reaction, is that you're fast in the detection. This is the first step. And that's what we are trying to do with all these synthetic stuff and these semantics.
Okay. So, I mean, it's obviously very clear, all operators want to optimize their networks. Automation is going to help with that, but you can't really automate without the right data sets and being able to manage that properly. So to come back to Darrell's point, I guess, what sort of data lake, for want of a better term, do telcos need? How do they decide what they're going to work on? And maybe I can, put that question back to you, Darrell, in terms of the experience or what you will have seen with the operators that you're working with.
Sure. I think from a Wind River perspective, we're working with a lot of operators as they deploy O-RAN, at the far edge of the network. And that's a disaggregated infrastructure. So there's a lot of data that comes back on deploying, but more importantly, sort of day to operations. What is the dynamic data that's coming back that allow us to automate certain functions around, power utilization. We were talking about that yesterday. And that what we found is, you can play with the P and C state of a microprocessor to save power, but it's the entire system that makes the difference. So you've got to control the software that's controlling the radio. So if you want, from an automotive perspective, you've not got your foot on the petrol or gas pedal all the time. You're chewing up a lot of power. So we're looking at ways of actually leveraging that dynamic data that's coming in order for us to provide insights, observability to driving better network functionality and managing real cost benefits associated with a disaggregated, more complex by definition environment that we're working on. And we're seeing that become more interesting for a lot of operators, and a lot of operators trying to figure out how they can scale that into other areas of the network.
Okay. And Vish, just to come back and clarify a point we talked about just before in terms of data structures, to what extent are you getting input from TIP members into what they're doing that's allowing you then to offer something back to the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just following on from what Darrell was saying. I think, obviously, O-RAN workloads are one of the areas that the TIP community is working on. And the best results that we're seeing are very specific, XApp and RApp use cases coming out from the community. So we have 17 odd prioritized ones in TIP. But looking at energy saving, cause optimization, slicing, massive MIMO beam set, there are a number of applications that are being developed through an O-RAN architecture. And from that, you're actually starting to see what the RF signaling and protocols are coming through the stack and how the application is onboarded and actually starts to have an effect on that RAN performance. The only way operators feel comfortable in testing that is in a sort of a test environment that is controlled with rig tests from VRV or Keysight, et cetera, that actually generate the use cases and the real world scenarios to see the dynamic sort of results out of that. That's what we're sharing in the community right now. But as I might be naive here, connecting the dots between what I've heard this morning through to now, if there is a model where telcos want to be a part of a value chain where they're generating or capitalizing on their network assets and generating service revenues, then and it might be B2B, as Laurent was saying this morning, then there's got to be very specific use cases that actually then generate requirement for specific compute power in the edge, and therefore data requirements as a part of that. I think, yes, fair enough, there is data available, but for an industry to scale at least 60-70% of those requirements through it so that you can actually generate some real returns in the industry, we've got to find ways to actually centralize that, aggregate it, anonymize it, make structures for actually exposing it, deal with market regulation policies, et cetera. So from a TIP perspective, that's where I see our member community wanting to go, but time will tell whether we actually start to manifest platforms around that.
Okay. And Faiq, from the Rakuten perspective.
So can I build on that?
Obviously,
before I lose the chain of my thoughts.
Yeah.
There's something I want to build on top of what Darrell said and Vish said, are we saying that for telcos without Open RAN, there is a real challenge in the openness to achieve the true automation? Because I asked this question because, of course, I'm a little biased and have the experience of seeing the benefits of this in Rakuten, Japan. You look at the energy saving use case. You talk about it like, the most common industry practice is that, okay, I can get it on the server levels on a data center or COTS level. But I mean, truly what I learned in Rakuten, Japan and Open RAN environment that it is about the per user level and application usage. And that is only possible because we had the opportunity to, of course, have the data in the most correct cloud-native distributed environment, but the openness. And I believe that this is a fundamental challenge to achieve the true use cases of automation unless we have that openness. So while I shared this example, I wanted to ask again, Diego and others that, I mean, how are we intending to solve this without like the slow industry adoption towards certain newness, which I know it's a big topic. We want to go there, we don't want to go there. It has its pros and cons. I'm not getting into that debate, but the openness remains the challenge to get the true benefit of these use cases. I don't know if Diego or anybody else has any thoughts.
If I may, the same way that open source doesn't mean free software, I would say that talking about openness in data exchanges or even knowledge exchanges doesn't mean that you are providing all data that you can generate or all data you are aware. It's true that we need some models or ways of sharing data, but sharing data in the same way that currently I like very much the original idea around the internet, not what the internet is or what we call the internet right now is, but what it was thought of as a cooperating autonomous systems. And the principles are around this good old protocol that is called BGP. I tell you what you can find behind me. If you connect to me, I tell you what you can find and the cost, in whatever the terms, in hops or bandwidth or whatever, I tell you the cost of reaching there. It's the same. I can't tell you what I'm consuming or how much congested I am or whatever. I tell you, I'm not exposing my data, but I'm telling you what would allow us to collaborate. I think that model should be applicable. We have made some experiments for different reasons because I had to do more with security and how much we were exposing. There is a protocol that has been standardized as well in the ITF that is called Alto, that has to deal about exposing data about your topology and some measurements regarding your topology. I think that doing that way probably is a way to go. We had to define it, and we had to guarantee provenance and integrity and things like that, but I think we have the bricks to build it.
Okay. I just wanted to, we're going to come to energy efficiency specifically a little bit later on, Anita, and I know that's something obviously the NGMN looks at a lot, but you also do, the NGMN does a lot of work around cloud native as well, and obviously that comes back to automation and data use. Is there anything, within the confines of the NGMN, is this something that crops up that the members are asking the NGMN? Can you look at maybe models around which data to collect from where and how to use it, or is that not really within the domain, as it were?
Yeah, good question. So we're not really looking into the usage of data. So we do have a network automation project up and running. It's focused on influencing upcoming 3GPP releases. But where we currently also continue our work is to achieve cloud nativeness. And there is a strong belief that without being truly cloud native, it will be hard to automate, probably hard to impossible. And therefore, what we are currently discussing is how can we cooperate with other organizations like TIP or Team Forum with regards to providing requirements for validation centers, for assessment methodologies, when it comes to autonomous networks, for instance, with regards to cloud nativeness of platforms. So that's something we are really keen to continue to drive in the industry, to make it a reality.
I mean, what we're really seeing again over these 2 days is that nearly everything we talk about interlinks with everything else, and you can't really do one without the other. And of course, data is right at the heart of this, as is security. And Sadiuke, I want to come to you as well to find out what entity Docomo is doing, but I want to do it in the context of a slightly broader talking point around the impact of network disaggregation and whether this actually makes optimization harder. We hear continuously from sort of various parts of the industry that disaggregation, it's complex. It isn't reducing energy efficiency. There isn't a lot of gains, but of course from the supporters we hear that all of these things are happening. So is, from Docomo's experience in its radio access network, is optimization, can that be improved through disaggregation? And I also want to get your thoughts on the data lake aspect. Is there a clear way about that Docomo has maybe about what data to collect and how to manage that?
Okay, so first back to the 4G, because in 4G already introduced some functionality. I think most of operators already introduced some features. And from 4G, actually, we deploy much vendor network. That means that we use different vendors equipment in the same geographic area. And gathering the information from that, so each ENOB. And we do that optimization. So even though the disaggregate or this much vendor network, we achieve that optimization, like load balancing, the ANR or other features defined as CGPP. So with that standardization interface or standardization data, we can optimize the network. And as for the 5G, especially so the Open RAN, of course that CGPP defined that features, and also that All Alliance defined the use case, and they also try to define that what data is needed to support those use cases. So with that data, even though the disaggregated network we're using different vendors equipment, we can achieve that optimization. And especially for the energy saving, we may need to more information about the radio unit specification itself. Yeah, that part is that sometimes not defined. So we can control the policy, but we don't know the detail, the sleep model for each RU. So that case, so if that vendor provide that some of the detail, we can do that more optimization. But if that vendor provide just the standardized interface, not 100% energy, the optimization we can. We try to do the work with that our partner vendors, even though that different vendors we use.
Okay. Shame you weren't here first thing yesterday morning because Iago Tenorio was talking about some of the data they're getting back from their RFQ, but unfortunately he can't tell us the details because it's an RFQ, but he was hinting strongly at some interesting data coming back from that process. Faiq, in terms of what's going on, with Rakuten Mobile, what's the experience there in terms of optimization and automation? What lessons or what insights can Rakuten offer to other operators?
I think Rakuten's story in itself has been revolutionary, and in markets like Japan and Europe, where Rakuten Japan Mobile and with 101 Corporation. The biggest, I would say, the message is that to take the risk and accept possible consequences with it. I believe today in operator environment and CSP, DSP environment, there is a very risk-averse mindset, and which is the biggest limitation for industry to move as fast we all would like it to move. And that has been the cornerstone where that Rakuten was brave enough to share those experiences and bring that technology change. Again, I'll go back that, we build, and we were in the right privileged situation to build a fully cloud-native environment, which helped in the journey with the openness we had, but that has been the cornerstone in bringing the true automation and AI use cases, which some environments struggle to achieve. I'll build up like on the same thing which we were talking about, energy saving, and it was something very interesting that like the kind of percentage energy savings we were able to achieve because of the infrastructure we were able to build and the openness of the data by going on subscriber level and on application level to reduce the energy on pods. rather than your traditional claims of other environments. Now, as long as industry will, I appreciate what Diego you said about the new protocols and standards being worked. I appreciate, but I do find it challenging that with some of the proprietary infrastructure vendors, we will always have this struggle because the openness is going to remain challenged. The automation results are not going to be what are truly beneficial to the true KPI needs of the industry. So,
Döhler was talking about cooperation among operators because we are much more used to cooperate with our competitors than our vendors. That's another.
Fair enough. I think that's the biggest message, that like there's a lack of acceptance to change and possible learnings or consequences around it. And I think the industry needs to be braver about it.
Can I just try and build upon this? Multifaceted issue, but look, there are potential. If you think about the fact that we need to be addressing the challenge that a CTO of a national operator or a tier 2 operator is trying to face. So that CTO sitting there being told by group or by CEO said, look, one, you've got to think about disaggregation, create some choice in your RAN network. Two, I want you to drive forward some level of automation to get some real value out of your network and make sure it's optimized for the future. Three, hey, everyone's talking about AI. You need to be user-specific. Start to generate and monetize your network. Three different things, challenges, which as an industry, to scale that out is massive and it's big. So if anything, let's just take the positives. There's some choice in the market. You got Rakuten Symphony, you got Oryx, you got Wind River, Dell, Samsung Stack, you got Mavenir. They are Open RAN friendly, they are driving forward cloud native, automated sort of scenarios. Should that CTO go and swap out a legacy network provider and try this out? Maybe not on my public or major network, but I'll give a discrete look at a private network play or something that is off the major network. Let me learn about it. Second is, can I actually start to drive forward some level of AI and automation? Actually, yes, there's choice now in the market. There are some open RIC players, there are some AI X apps out there that are probably more user-centric than our apps. Still a bit more standards to develop, but at least I can start to build a bit of knowledge, understand what data protocols and signals are coming through, understand the stack, how it integrates in, but I'll do that in my lab, in a controlled environment. Actually, there might be my incumbent vendor might be creating, it's not going to share its data, their data with other players, but we might create a closed ecosystem there. So you're going to start to see that manifesting. Going towards actually driving a distributed compute strategy, putting an edge cloud sort of strategy in play, that's where the CTO wants to be going. Are they ready to do that yet? No, there's still quite a bit to be worked through in the industry. It's a great challenge to have, but I think we've got to go step by step. That CTO needs to feel comfortable, and that's why TIP's there, trying to get some reference architectures, blueprints, models that are working. Well done to Iago and getting a deal with I2CAT and getting a multi-vendor management system in play. Brilliant. We need to see more of that, and we need to start not just talking about the science of this, but actually get on with it and show some reference blueprints out there.
And before I come to Darrell, I just want to very quickly ask Fish, you mentioned there the RAN intelligent control of the RIC and the X apps. Now, some of those tests and trials have actually been going on for about 2 years in some of the operators.
Yeah.
And things still don't seem to be sort of coming out into the market, despite what does sound like some quite significant optimization gains from some of those apps. What's holding stuff up there? Is how much can you give away from what you know?
I think moving from trial to actual commercial deployment and scale does need to be a little bit more aggressive. I agree with Faiq. I think some of the operators can probably take a step forward.
Right. So
and
it's
actually
that risk aversion, you think? Okay.
And I think what the session, the first panel discussion yesterday was a testament, like, what we saw, what's happening in Vodafone. But the way Vish said, like, out of these three things, at least the operator environment needs to take a leap of faith or aggressiveness, at least on the two. The challenge is, if we're going to keep playing safe, the true results will continue getting delayed. I know some of people will not agree with it, but that's the challenge.
I can feel Diego swiveling in his chair here. So.
What I'm thinking is that I would not say that this industry is or suffers more than of reconversion than any other industry. I mean, it's a big industry with many customers and many things that are considered critical. We didn't have that risk aversion when we deployed the first mobile networks. And in fact, when I joined Telefónica 10 years ago, when the mobile network architecture was already established, etc., to me, to an outsider, the mobile network is not especially well architected, if you think about it. Why? Because it was necessary to build the whole thing, and the telcos were really bold in building this. Making some mistakes, for sure, but they made it. Right now, you have to avert risk because you have many important assets to keep, and you have a very high price to pay if you make a big mistake. So when we criticize ourselves, I mean, I always remember what Niels used to say, that this industry has changed the world several times. Don't forget that. Well, yes, when we're talking about, let's try to invent a new network that is not mobile, is not fixed, is whatever. And then let's see if we have the risk aversion. Let's go greenfield. Yeah.
Darrell, I know you wanted to come in there because you're working with some CTOs that are starting to take that leap of faith, right?
Yeah, I was just lamenting, I'm going to date myself here. I joined the telecommunications industry after being in the Royal Navy. And the reason I did that 30 years ago, so I was going to date myself, I decided to go work for AT&T. And the reason I did it at that time is because AT&T invented just about anything. Innovation was there. Skills were there. People that I went to school with or university with wanted to be part of that then. I'm worried about now because is the talent in our businesses? Have we outsourced so much to the traditional radio access or infrastructure vendors so they provide a complete solution so we don't have those skills to innovate and move as quickly? And that's a generalization topic. Some operators do and others. And now what I see, to your point, is CTOs saying, hey, we need to get that back. We need to innovate a little bit more. We need to do disaggregation and move ourselves into uncomfortable spaces and learn again to fail quickly. We talked about that yesterday, in order for us to do things. So we are seeing CTOs in operators that typically don't take those sorts of risks, wanting to take those risks, because they see the opportunity to innovate will inherently deliver them competitive advantage and optionality in their own businesses, and they're trying to do things differently.
Okay.
That's my perspective. That's what I've noticed and seen.
Okay. Now, time is actually sort of getting on a bit, and I definitely want to come to the energy efficiency point. It's already cropped up a few times, but also I want to see if we've got any questions from the audience as well. So if you do have any questions, now is the time to put your hand up. We have people with microphones. Yes, we have one over here. If you could state your name and your company and who your question is for.
Hello, my name is Mojda Amani. I work around data, AI automation, and I'm from BT. My question is from Diego. As you mentioned about your early detection of incidents and events, where are you at the moment in your journey? Because we are dealing with data swamps more than data lakes here and there, and we have similar vendors, similar platforms, similar tools, and I want to know, do you have any experience that you can share here regarding the journey that you are going through to sort out your data before going to any other automation process?
Sorry, what we are trying to learn, what we're talking about early detection, what we're trying to learn is we're making experiments to generate data sets that can be used to train systems that identify those early symptoms before a human can detect it and before the actual impact happens. How we do it is, as I said, we are trying to run synthetic environments in which we replicate conditions that normally don't happen. I mean, that when they happen in the real network are bringing us real problems. So, for example, I don't know, something that is typical is a massive distributed denial of service attack. When this is happening in your network, you don't have, many occasions, you don't have any time even for collect the data. You simply have to reply to it. What we are trying is to train systems to detect those early symptoms and start applying countermeasures, whatever they are. I mean, typically, when we think about anomalies, we always are thinking about security attacks, etc. But we can be talking about, well, some time ago, I read that when this Gangnam Style video became so famous, there was an overload in many places because people were asking like crazy for the Gangnam Style and the CDNs were not replying fast enough. That's an incident. It's not an attack. Well, maybe it's an attack to good taste, but that's another story. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to replicate, to generate those data sets that are valuable because normally they are not, they are not fully realistic because they have not been generated by the real network, but can help us in identifying this.
You are experimenting with event stress in your network, right?
Unknown
or not known? Are the events known or they are some unknown?
Well, the idea is that if you simply want to detect the anomaly, for sure, is you train the whole thing with normal behavior, and whatever goes out, that is an anomaly. We are trying to go beyond that and try to generate situations that we know are going to happen, and then trying to identify things that normally even for very experienced operators are a little bit, they are not part of their experience of the symptoms, but they are a symptom. We're trying to identify that.
Right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the energy efficiency point, because this has cropped up a few times. And essentially, just basically ask, can networks be optimized, automated for optimization, and yet be more energy efficient? Because there seems like that could be a pretty tough set of things to put together. So, Anita, I want to start with you, because the NGMN's been looking at sustainable network developments and trying to put, some of these KPIs in place as well, which are, of course, are very important. How can energy efficiency be improved at the same time as networks are automated and optimized?
Personally, I believe yes, but we need to look into the details. And what we are experiencing in our project, for instance, is where different operators work together with different vendors, that it's very hard to obtain reliable data points with regards to how much efficiency gains can be achieved and how much energy savings can be achieved. And there is still this big question, how much energy does the artificial intelligence consume? So if we use different models for network optimization, which also should lead, of course, or contribute to the target of 0 watt at 0 load, the question is, would we then just move the energy consumption to another place? So I think we really need to take a holistic approach here for being able to assess where actually we have the energy efficiency gains and where energy, or in general power consumption, is going down in total. So looking at the overall picture. And when it comes to KPIs, our recommendation was to link such KPIs always with quality of experience, because I think that's something which is also holding operators back to launch such programs. Some are doing this very aggressively already now, but we heard also quite frequently that there is a danger that the user experience is damaged with different approaches, and therefore I think quality of experience, a holistic approach with regards to energy consumption, energy efficiency is really needed, and also probably some form of KPI and source data normalization so that we can really rely on statements of different vendors, different operators, how much energy efficiency, energy improvements, energy consumption improvements can be achieved. It's very hard to assess the correctness of such data at the moment. Yeah.
And also which one wins out. You know, you have to make that decision, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
Sadayuki, you mentioned earlier about some of the potential energy efficiency gains you were noticing in your network. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you see that progressing? As data volumes grow, will the efficiencies and the automation be able to mitigate that data growth against the power consumption that's required?
Yes, you know, the traffic dynamic changes, especially in the morning or daytime work. So we measure traffic and we control that radio unit accordingly. That is already operating in both 4G and 5G. And so we see that the energy gain to introduce those features in commercial network. Of course, the setting KPI are a little bit difficult, so not easy to estimate or not easy that the target performance, because that it's highly depend on the traffic and also how much resource actually we have that, and also that it also depend on that RU type. So legacy type is that so sweep mode is not so efficient honestly, but latest one is that more efficient sweep mode they have. So we have those the characteristic of the each RU, so we control. But basically we do that simple operation like town and town and based on the traffic.
Right.
Yeah, and at this moment we can do we haven't achieved that. So resource optimization, especially the baseband part. But so introduce that the cost server, we will introduce that more the resource pooling gain according to the traffic. Of course, we share the resource among between the different cells. So in that sense, some traffic is high traffic, some cell is a low traffic. In total, seems average. But this also dynamically change according to that daytime. So that's actually we already introduced in commercial. So I think that optimized energy saving is still that challenge. I mean that 30% or 40% is enough or not is that I can't answer. But we introducing those functionality and how we can more optimize with their additional algorithm. So that is current our network, and I think it works, even though the much better network.
Okay. Faiq, I want to come to you as well, because I know that Rakuten's been looking into this pretty heavily. Of course, you want to be able to take some of this experience international as well.
Yes, I think I've beaten on this point quite a bit earlier already, so I don't want to keep repeating it, but we take a lot of pride on the results we have achieved, and we are taking it out in the industry. I'm very happy that we did talk about it in other forums, and we will continue to do so. So we believe that this is where we can add, to point earlier Vish was mentioning as well, like not only just from an Open RAN perspective, but other ways of learning where via Rakuten Symphony platforms, we educate the industry, and happy to take the positive results of that in the market and share experiences.
And Diego, going to come to you for the final word here, because I'm sure this is, this is something that Telefónica looks at and reports on its data stats as well in terms of how it's doing on its sustainability journey. How much is the energy efficiency consideration brought into the work you're doing on optimization?
We are trying to bring it as it's one of the key goals. I want to say that we are fully centered on this. We are taking into account other considerations, and in general, sustainability in its widest concept, not only in terms of consumption of energy in a certain point of time, as well about the reusability of the deployments we make, and the fact that we are trying to contribute in a holistic view to our footprint in terms of consumption of resources. So right. This is very important, and we are making as I was saying about taking pride of that how serious we are taking this.
Okay, fantastic. So we are almost out of time for this session, so we do need to end the discussion there. Let's first, before we end, let's take a look at the poll results so far. Just a reminder, the question we asked, which was, what will have the greatest impact on improving network operational efficiency over the next 5 years? Let's see what came out. Transitioning to a cloud-native architecture got the biggest score there with 49%. Deploying advanced AI and ML solutions, 40%. So cloud-native ahead of AI and ML, that's very interesting. And leveraging SDN for dynamic resource allocation, 11%. So that's a pretty interesting, I mean, maybe we've talked so much about the impact of cloud native here the next 2 days. Everybody's like, yes, cloud native every time. Now this poll, as with the others, is still open, so you can continue to vote and have an input there. But that is the end of this session 7. There is one more to go. Guy and I have been talking over the past few days about how we're very focused at this event. We always want to bring it back to the customers, and the final session we have is focused on that. We'll be back at, 3:30. In 16 minutes' time, we're going to be back and focusing on the customer. So it's a short break, just enough time to grab a coffee. The last chance to get the best coffee you're going to have this week. For our online audience, we're about to start another extra shot program, so don't miss it. Please stay with us. For now, let's thank Diego, our co-host, and our panelists. Thank you very much.